She was still wearing her ID lanyard when they asked for it back. That's the detail that stayed with people who saw it happen. Not the cardboard box, not the fact that she kept her voice steady while Principal Nneka read the violations off his clipboard. It was the lanyard. Green and yellow, the school colors, with her name printed in clean block letters. Learning Support Specialist, Maplecrest Academy. She had worn that lanyard every single day for 9 years. The vice principal reached out and lifted it from around her neck. Gently, like he was embarrassed. Maybe he was. Nneka watched him hold it. 9 years folded into a palm. Behind him, Principal Ikau Asiedu Branta stood with a manila folder pressed flat against his chest, and a look on his face she had learned to read in her first month at Maplecrest. It was the look of a man who had already decided the outcome and was now simply managing the paperwork. He was 49, stocky and compact, the kind of man who moved through spaces like he expected them to make room for him. His skin was a deep, warm brown with amber undertones that caught the fluorescent light in the hallway almost like gold. His head was shaved to a precise fade. His glasses were titanium-framed, expensive. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second opinion and a pocket square the exact color of the school crest. Everything about Ikau Asiedu Branta was deliberate. "Miss Nneka," he said, his voice flat and administrative, "your employment with Maplecrest Academy is terminated effective immediately. The grounds are as follows: unauthorized use of clinical assessment resources without administrative approval, contravention of the withdrawal protocol for scholarship students under review, and direct insubordination of a formal administrative directive." Nneka looked at him for a long moment. "I was protecting a child. You overstepped your authority." He was 9 years old and he was in crisis, Ikau. He couldn't breathe. He was shaking on the library floor. Ikau's jaw tightened. The appropriate channel was to contact the on-call counselor through administration and wait for family notification. You bypassed both. The on-call counselor was 45 minutes away. The child's father was already in the building. I made a call. "Mrs. Nneka." His voice dropped to something that thought it was patience. "Bolu Babatunde is a scholarship student currently under administrative review for withdrawal. He is not at this time your student." She felt those words land the way words do when they tell you exactly what someone believes a child is worth. She looked down the hallway, past the student artwork pinned to the corkboard strips, past the trophy case, past the door to the resource room where she had spent 3 months building, reading program materials from scratch, staying past 7 in the evening, learning which font and which line spacing made the letters stop jumping for a 9-year-old boy that everyone else had quietly, tidily given up on. Classroom 7B, the door was closed. She knew Bolu was in there right now, sitting in the 3rd seat by the window because the light was best there, probably tapping his pencil against his knee, probably watching the door. Ikau held out the cardboard box the office administrator had already packed. "Your personal belongings." Nneka took the box. She walked down the hallway. When she passed classroom 7B, she did not stop. She did not look through the narrow window in the door. But her free hand reached out and her fingers brushed the doorframe, just barely the way you might touch a shoulder before you have to leave. Inside that classroom, a 9-year-old boy named Bolu Babatunde had, as of last Tuesday, read a full page of a chapter book on his own for the first time in his life. And that was enough. It had to be enough. At the far end of the corridor, half in shadow, beside the supply closet, a man was watching. He was tall, maybe 6'1", lean in the quiet way of someone who has carried heavy things for a long time. His skin was a deep, rich brown, close to blue-black in the shadow of the hallway. His face was angular, high cheekbones, a jaw that looked made to hold things together. His eyes were dark, not flat, not calculating, but deep. The kind of eyes that have seen something enormous and kept going anyway. His hair was cropped short, graying at the temples. His hands, wrapped around a broom handle, were rough and calloused. His coveralls were gray, with a small Maplecrest maintenance logo on the left breast pocket. His name badge said one word: Jide. He was the school custodian, had been for 3 years. He watched Nneka walk out of Maplecrest Academy with her box and her bare neck where the lanyard used to be. He did not look away. But this story doesn't start here. It starts 8 months earlier, on the first morning of the school year, when a small boy with 2 large shoes and a backpack that kept sliding off his shoulder walked through the front doors of Maplecrest Academy for the very first time. Bolu Babatunde was 9 years old, small for his age, round-cheeked, enormous dark eyes that moved over everything around him like he was trying to memorize it all at once. He was bright. Anyone who spent 10 minutes with him knew it without being told. He could explain why the sky turned orange at sunset. He could tell you the wingspan of a barn owl. He could do a perfect impression of 3 different accents and make a whole room laugh without trying. But he could not read, or rather, the letters moved when he tried. They shifted and mirrored and swapped places on the page like they had somewhere else to be. He had come to Maplecrest on a community access scholarship, one of 3 the school offered through a municipal diversity grant. He was placed in year 4. Within 2 weeks, his classroom teacher had made a quiet note in his file. Student struggling significantly. May not be appropriate for our program. Nneka saw that note on a Thursday afternoon. She had been at Maplecrest for 9 years, educational psychology degree from the University of Toronto, postgraduate certificate in learning exceptionalities. She had grown up in Scarborough, daughter of a woman who cleaned hotel rooms on the early shift and a man who drove the same bus route through Etobicoke 6 days a week. Her parents had come from Kumasi before she was born. They had given her 2 instructions: work like no one is watching and never walk past a child who needs you. She had never walked past one. She requested Bolu's file. She requested a meeting with his classroom teacher. Then she sat with Bolu himself in the resource room on a Friday afternoon and gave him a simple assessment she had designed herself. No reading required. Just listening, pattern recognition, problem solving. Within 20 minutes, she knew exactly what she was looking at. "Bolu," she said, leaning forward across the small table, "can I ask you something personal?" He looked at her with those enormous eyes, wary. He had been in enough rooms with enough adults holding enough files to know that questions from adults usually meant more bad news. "Why do you think reading is hard for you?" He was quiet for a moment, then very carefully, "Because my brain got the wires crossed." Nneka blinked. "Who told you that?" "Nobody. I figured it out." He tapped his temple with one finger, like, "The information goes in fine. It just comes out in the wrong order sometimes." She looked at this boy. "That," she said quietly, "is one of the most accurate descriptions of dyslexia I've ever heard from a 9-year-old. He stared at her. "Is that what it's called?" "I think so, and I want to help you, if that's all right." He studied her for a long moment, then he nodded, just once, but the kind of once that means everything. She worked with him every day, before school, during her preparation periods. After school twice a week, she printed texts in dyslexia-friendly fonts. She made reading overlays in the colors his brain found easiest. She sourced audiobooks for his homework assignments. She began the formal paperwork for a psychological assessment, the first step toward an individual education plan through the school board. Slowly, Bolu began to read. Not quickly, not perfectly, but he started to trust that the words on the page might stay still long enough for him to catch them. In the evenings, after the building emptied, Jaidi would push his cart down the 3rd-floor hallway, and Nneka would still be at her desk in the resource room, the light on, surrounded by printed worksheets and colored overlays and library books bristling with sticky tabs. Jaid mopped around her desk without disturbing anything. She always looked up. "Good evening, Jaid." Not "hey," not "don't forget the corner by the shelf," just his name, said the way you say the name of someone you actually see. In 3 years, she was the only person in that building who did it. He had noticed, he always noticed, but he said nothing because Jide Babatunde had been saying nothing for a long time. He had been born in Ibadan, in the southwest of Nigeria. His father taught secondary school mathematics and marked papers by candlelight. His mother sold fabric at the OJ market and counted money from a worn envelope every Sunday to make sure there was enough for school fees. Jaid had grown up watching both of them and understanding, without being told, what it meant to build something from very little. He built his first software product at 23, at a shared desk in a Lagos co-working space, with a fan that only worked on its lowest setting. By 31, he had 60 people working with him. By 35, his company, an educational software platform that helped low-resource schools across Africa run curriculum digitally, had operations in 12 countries and a valuation that made investors fly to Lagos to meet him. He sold it for $410 million. He reinvested, he expanded. By 42, Babatunde Learning Systems was one of the largest educational technology firms in West Africa and the Caribbean. The portfolio was valued at just over $900 million. Then Amira got sick. His wife, 38 years old, ovarian cancer diagnosed late, moved fast. She died 14 months after they found it. Bolu was 4. Jide handed the company management to his board and his 2 partners, and he took his son and flew to Toronto, because Toronto was far and cold and no one in Toronto knew the name Babatunde the way they knew it in Lagos and London and Accra. He wanted to disappear, not forever, just long enough to grieve, long enough to understand what the world looked like when no one knew who you were, when you were measured only by what your name badge said and what your hands looked like. He found out. The world, it turned out, treated a man in gray coveralls like furniture. Teachers left their mess in the staff room without looking at him. Parents at pickup never made eye contact. People spoke past him in hallways. He was stepped around, looked through, and politely, efficiently ignored. But there were exceptions. The facilities manager who remembered his coffee order, the grade 1 teacher who left handwritten thank you notes in her classroom after he cleaned it during holidays, and the learning support specialist on the 3rd floor who said his name every single evening like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, like he was a person worth knowing. He did not tell her any of this. He had come to Maplecrest with a Nokia phone in his coveralls, and a different locked phone in his truck, and an agreement with himself that Jide, the custodian, would live this life fully, without reaching for the other one. Until the day he couldn't. In October, Eko Asedu Branta called Nneka into his office. She sat across his enormous desk with Bolu's progress reports in her hands, 3 months of documented growth, the draft IEP, a letter from the school board outlining the supplementary funding Maplecrest would receive if they put the formal support plan in place. Ikao did not look at any of it. The Scholarship Review Committee met yesterday, he said. It is our position that Bolu Babatunde's placement at Maplecrest is not the right fit. The learning support costs associated with his file significantly exceed what the scholarship grant covers. The committee has voted to withdraw his scholarship, effective end of month. The room was very quiet. He's reading, Nneka said. Mrs. Nneka. He could not read a grade 1 sentence in September. Last week he read a full page of a chapter book on his own. That is documentable, measurable progress. The committee's decision has been made. Has the committee met him? Ekau removed his glasses and set them on the desk, the move of a man who has decided he is done being redirected. The committee reviews files. That is their function. There are 2 students on the community access waitlist who have been assessed as better fits for our program. This is a resource allocation decision. Nneka looked at him. She understood with complete clarity what resource allocation meant. It meant Bolu was expensive and complicated and didn't make the school look the way the school wanted to look. Give me 4 more weeks, she said. The formal psych assessment is booked for November 12th. Once we have that report, I can apply through the IPRC process. The school would actually receive additional provincial funding to support him. The decision has been made. Ikao, she stopped herself. I'm asking you not to do this. He picked his glasses back up, settled them on his face, looked at her over the frames. Bolu Babatunde will be transitioned out of Maplecrest by the 31st. You are to have no further direct academic contact with him until the family has been formally notified. That is a directive. I am asking you to respect it. She left without saying another word. Sat in her car in the parking lot for 6 minutes. Did not cry. Drove home. In the hallway outside Ekau's office, Jide mopped the same stretch of floor 4 times, not because it needed it. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, Nneka was putting on her coat to leave when she heard the sound from the library. It was small and high and controlled, the sound of someone trying very hard not to fall apart and not entirely succeeding. She should have kept walking. Bolu was not technically under her care. Ikau's directive had been explicit. The family had been notified. His last day was in 6 days. She pushed open the library door. He was on the floor between 2 shelves, knees to his chest, backpack beside him, face pressed into his arms, his entire body shaking. Bolu. He looked up, eyes red, breathing fast and shallow and completely wrong. Miss Nneka. Her name cracked in the middle when he said it. She sat down on the floor next to him, right there, between the shelves. Hey, look at me. Just breathe. He was hyperventilating, hands trembling. She had seen this before, the anxiety attacks that arrived in children under severe sustained stress and looked, to them, exactly like the world ending. She knew the protocol. Call it through administration. Notify the on-call counselor through the main line. Wait for authorization. She also knew the on-call counselor was 45 minutes across the city, and the authorization process was 30 minutes before that. She pulled out her phone and called Jide. He was the only other person still in the building. He was also Bolu's father. She stayed on the floor for 20 minutes, talking Bolu through his breathing, letting him hold her hand when the shaking got bad, running a breathing exercise from the resource file she had saved to her phone 3 years ago. She opened her school laptop and initiated the crisis resource protocol without waiting for a sign-off that wasn't coming. When Jide came through the library door, coveralls still on, face carefully steady, Nneka stood up. He's okay, she said quietly. Panic episode, he's leveling out. Jide went to his son. He knelt on the library floor and pulled Bolu against his chest and held him the way a man holds something he would burn the world down to protect. Over the top of the boy's head, he looked at Nneka. He didn't have the English, or perhaps the composure, to say what was behind his eyes, so he just nodded. She was terminated the next morning. She drove home with the box in the back seat, the plant she had kept alive for 4 years on a windowsill above the whiteboard, the framed quote her students had signed for her birthday, her dyslexia reference manual, all the sticky tabs still in it, the lanyard. She sat in the Tim Hortons parking lot 3 blocks from the school and ordered a medium double-double, because that is what you do in Canada when the grief has nowhere else to go, and she let herself feel all of it. Not the quiet kind of feeling. The other kind. The kind that comes from somewhere in your stomach and bends you over the steering wheel. 9 years. Every assessment she'd ever written. Every parent meeting she'd stayed late for. Every child who had learned to trust a page of words in her resource room, who had learned they were not broken, who had walked out of that room believing in their own mind for the first time. She cried until there was nothing left, then she drove home. In the maintenance shed at the back of Maplecrest's property, Jide opened the locked box on the bottom shelf behind the spare mop heads. The phone inside was matte black, recent model, fully charged. He powered it on, 3 contacts. He pressed the first one. It rang once. Jide. The voice on the other end was alert, careful, a man who had learned to hear the shape of a call before it was explained. It's been a long time. Yusuf, his lawyer, his oldest friend, currently running GD's Canadian holdings from an office 12 blocks from Bay Street. I need something. Tell me. A school, Maplecrest Academy in Mississauga. Find me the parent corporation, the full ownership structure, every board seat, all of it. A pause, give me an hour. Also, Jide looked at his son in the back seat of the second-hand truck, asleep, face round and unguarded the way the child's face is supposed to look. A woman named Nneka, learning support specialist, terminated this morning. I want her full professional record, her credentials, her assessment work, everything. Silence for a moment. Jid. What happened? Jide looked at the gray coveralls, the name badge, the calloused hands. A woman saved my son, he said, and they fired her for it. 3 seconds of quiet. I'll call you in an hour, Yusuf said. He called back in 50 minutes. If you're still with me, I need you to hear what happens next. Because what this man does in the next 12 hours is the reason this channel exists. There are moments in life when someone does the right thing and it costs them everything. And then there are moments when fate stops looking away. Subscribe and stay. This is where it turns. Nneka's phone buzzed at 7:22 the next morning. Unknown number. Short message. Ms. Nneka, please don't make any decisions about your next steps until this afternoon. Someone would like to speak with you. A driver will come for you at 1 o'clock. You can trust this. She stared at the message for a long time. She almost deleted it. But something, she could not explain it and did not try, made her change out of her pajamas and put on the blue dress she'd bought for a conference last spring and sit on her couch and wait. The car that arrived was quiet and black. The driver introduced himself as David and said nothing else until they turned onto Bay Street. They parked underground beneath a glass tower she had walked past 100 times. 28th floor, boardroom. Lake Ontario flat and gray-blue through the windows, enormous and still and vast. Jide was standing when she walked in. She almost did not recognize him. He was wearing a dark navy suit, Italian from the cut, a white shirt open at the collar. His shoes were polished. His posture was different, not physically changed, but different the way a person is different when they are no longer holding something in. His face was the same. The high cheekbones, the deep-set eyes, the gray at his temples. But he stood the way a man stands when he no longer needs the room to accommodate him, because he already belongs in it. 3 people stood behind him, a woman with a legal pad, a man with a briefcase, a younger man with a tablet. Jide, Nneka said. He walked toward her, stopped 2 feet away. Mrs. Nneka, I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. The boardroom was very quiet. My name is Adejide Babatunde. I am the founder of Babatunde Learning Systems, an educational technology company with operations in 18 countries across Africa and the Caribbean. I have built curriculum platforms for 300,000 students who had no other access to quality schooling. He paused. I am worth considerably more money than a man in gray coveralls has any business being. Nneka felt the floor shift under her feet, just slightly. For the past 3 years, I have been working as the custodian at Maplecrest Academy. I chose it. I wore the coveralls. I mopped the hallways. I cleaned the bathrooms. I did this because I needed to understand what my life looked like from the outside, when no one knew who I was, when I was only what my hands looked like and what my name badge said. He took 1 step closer. In 3 years, you were the only person in that school who said my name, not the custodian, not hey, my name. Every evening without fail, good evening, Jide, like I was a person worth knowing. Nneka's throat tightened. And when my son was failing, when that school had already decided he was a cost and not a child, you stayed. You sat on a library floor with him when he couldn't breathe. You held his hand when he was shaking. You used every resource you had access to and several you didn't, because that was what he needed, and you are not someone who takes the easier path. His voice cracked. Just slightly, just enough. I cannot repay you for what you gave my son, but I can do this. He turned. The woman with the legal pad stepped forward. Mrs. Nneka, as of 6 o'clock this morning, Mr. Babatunde has acquired a controlling interest in the Ashgrove Education Group, the parent company of Maplecrest Academy, through a combination of asset purchase and board reconfiguration. The acquisition is complete. Nneka put her hand on the back of the nearest chair. Principal Asidu Branta's contract has been terminated. The board has been reconstituted. A new head of school will be named within 2 weeks. Additionally, Mr. Babatunde has established a permanent endowment, the Babatunde Inclusion Fund, which will cover all assessment and IEP support costs for every scholarship student at Maplecrest, indefinitely. Nneka looked at Jide. You bought the school, she said. I bought the school. Because they fired me? Because they tried to discard my son, and the only person standing between him and the door was a woman making $63,000 a year who drives a 10-year-old Civic with a parking pass for a lot that charges $14 a day. The tears came, not the exhausted kind from the parking lot yesterday. The other kind, the kind that arrives when the world suddenly realigns into something that makes sense. Jide reached into his jacket and produced a small white card. He held it out. She took it. Read it. Nneka, Director of Inclusive Learning and Student Advocacy, Maplecrest Academy, reporting directly to the Board of Governors. The position was created this morning, Jide said. No administrator can override your professional decisions on student well-being, not ever. She read it again. Then she started laughing, the full kind, the kind that happens when everything you have been carrying finally gets to set itself down. Jide smiled, a real smile, wide and warm and a little surprised, like a window that had been shut too long finally opening. "Mr. Babatunde," she said, still laughing, still crying, pressing the card against her chest, "Bolu asked me. That night in the library he asked me if I was coming back. I didn't know what to tell him." "What will you tell him now?" She looked at the card. She looked at Jide. She looked at Lake Ontario through the glass, gray and enormous and completely indifferent in the way that large, permanent things are. "I'll tell him I'll be there Monday." Echo Asidu Branta arrived at Maplecrest the next morning at 8:15, same as always, same parking spot, same entrance, same coffee in the same travel mug. His assistant met him in the hallway with a face that was carefully, professionally neutral. "There's a call from the board," they said immediately. He went into his office. He picked up the phone. The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Echo sat in his chair without moving for a long time. Then he stood up. He looked at the framed photo on his desk, himself at a school gala, shaking hands with a city councilor, the award plaque from the Private Education Association, the brass nameplate, Principal E. Asidu Branta. He left the nameplate. He took the briefcase. He walked out of Maplecrest Academy through the front doors. The maple trees out front were bare. The morning was cold and very bright and completely ordinary in the way that days are ordinary when they are unaware of their own significance. Not one person came out to see him go. 6 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, a small ceremony was held in the learning support room on the 3rd floor. The room had been renovated, brighter lights, acoustic panels, a reading nook built into the far corner with shelves full of audiobooks and dyslexia-friendly texts and picture books in 6 languages. Along the top of the wall, a new sign had been mounted in clean, pale wood. The Bolu Babatund Learning Center, because every child deserves someone who believes. Nneka stood in front of it with her hand over her heart. Her lanyard, new, green, and yellow, was around her neck. Her name now read, Nneka, Director of Inclusive Learning. Beside her stood Dr. Miriam Adam, the school psychologist who had quietly pushed every formal channel she could access on Bolu's behalf, now named Head of Student Wellness at Maplecrest. Behind them stood Jide, in a simple gray suit, holding Bolu's hand. Bolu was wearing a small blazer that was slightly too long in the sleeves. He kept pulling at the cuffs. His eyes moved over the room with that same absorbing brightness, only now they moved over words too, and the words stayed still. 3 weeks earlier, he had read an entire chapter book, beginning to end. He had brought it to Nneka's office the morning he finished it and placed it flat on her desk and said with absolute calm, "I finished it." Then he had turned around and walked back to class like it was the most ordinary thing. She had waited until he was gone to cry. Now she felt a small hand on her sleeve. "Mrs. Nneka," Bolu looked up at her. "Is this our school?" She looked at Jide. He looked back at her. And in that look was something that did not need words, the quiet recognition of 2 people who have been invisible inside the same building and who have, in their own way, been the only ones to see each other clearly. "No," Jide said softly to his son, "this is her school." Bolu considered this. Then he nodded, once, the way he always nodded when he had made a decision. Around them, the staff filled the hallway, teachers, educational assistants, the cafeteria worker who had always saved Bolu an extra cheese bun when the line ran out, the facilities manager who had once told Jide, quietly, that she had noticed him staying late in the library. All of them clapping, warm, imperfect, ordinary, and somehow exactly enough. There is one more thing worth saying before this story ends. Jide Babatunde could have enrolled Bolu in any school in the world. He could have hired 3 reading specialists and a private tutor before Bolu's first day anywhere. He had the money. He had always had the money. But he needed to know something that money cannot measure. He needed to know who would stay. who would sit on a library floor on a Tuesday evening when there was nothing to gain from sitting there, who would say a man's name in a hallway because that man was worth being named, who would look at a 9-year-old boy and see, past the file and the cost and the complicated paperwork, just a child whose mind worked differently, whose eyes held questions, whose potential was enormous and entirely unharvested, and decide that was enough of a reason. Nneka did not do any of what she did because she knew who Bolu's father was. She did it because Bolu needed her, and that has always been enough of a reason for her. Fate does not rush. It does not announce itself. It watches quietly and carefully and makes note of who stays when staying costs something real, and when it is ready, it does not send a warning. It sends a boardroom on the 28th floor, a small white card with a title no one can take away, and a boy in a too-long blazer who now reads every night before bed. If you want to see who fate is watching next, subscribe to Ancient African Folktales. Because in these stories, the ones who give when they have nothing to gain are always the ones who receive everything. And the ones who count the cost of a child, they walk out alone every time.